Hey everyone, I know I do some good smattering of different kind of topics on this channel. This one's a relatively heavy one. Basically, what most people know about fighting is completely wrong. Most of the stuff you see in movies, completely wrong. There's a very fundamental truth that those who have been through military training have either come to realize or have overcome that civilians don't even understand. And that simple fact is that 9 out of 10 soldiers, without proper training, will refuse to take a life. You say, well, no. 9 out of 10 untrained soldiers will refuse to take a life. This is a mathematical, psychological truth that has endured over thousands and thousands of years. This has been one of the great problems that militaries around the world have faced, and only in the last century have militaries truly overcome this. The U.S. military commissioned a major study in World War II. They couldn't understand why so few of their soldiers were hitting their targets. And after the conclusion of this massive study in World War II, they came to the conclusion that 9 out of 10 American soldiers were refusing to fire on their targets. 9 out of 10 American soldiers in World War II refused to fire on their targets. They sometimes shot at their targets, but intentionally missed. Other times they just didn't shoot at all. They stood in the foxholes. They got shot at. They died in their foxholes. But they refused to kill. Here's a book that has been highly recommended and is mandatory reading by most military officers and such. It's called On Killing. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. In this book, it basically summarizes what U.S. military has basically learned in the 50 years after World War II. Much of it was learned on the front end of that. And they revamped their entire training program to the point where nowadays somewhere between 5 to 10% of American soldiers intentionally miss their targets. Down from 90% down to 5 to 10% non-firing rate. That's huge. That changes everything. So when you start putting your little citizen group together and you're going to go do something, you need to take into account the very simple fact that 9 out of 10 of the people you've put together, maybe higher, will refuse to actually take a life when push comes to shove. You say, no, not our people. Our people, they're going to see how important it is. You can make them see how important it is, and you might get a 5% boost on those who will take a life. Militaries across the history have sometimes got it up as high as 30%. But that was very, very rare, and usually under very specific circumstances, like you're defending your home. Like your family is literally right behind you. 30% will be willing to take a life in that situation. That doesn't jive with what most of you guys have stuck in your head there. You say, if someone came through my door, I would. Statistically speaking, you would not. Statistically speaking, you would not. That's the simple truth. You may attack them, throw stuff at them, you may fire around the person, but you probably won't actually try to take a life. And that is science. That's truth. Those who have been in the military or who have been trained by law enforcement have been deprogrammed from this. Their training takes over and will allow them to do what needs doing before they think about it. You unless you've been deprogrammed, unless you've been trained, you will probably do what you think you should. And your thinking is going to be guided by your heart and your soul. And your heart and soul are going to say, don't take a life no matter what. This is the truth. And you need to face it. If you've trained properly to overcome this, then you may be able to go through it. But if you haven't, you will not be able to overcome this, generally speaking. There are things that you can do. There's a reason why the U.S. military now trains with pop-up targets and silhouettes. If you've trained with those, if you've trained reactionary, where you are quickly responding to situations that are forced upon you, where you respond quickly and you dehumanize your targets. Targets, not people, targets. There's reason for that. Silhouettes in human shape. Because the simple fact is that when that happens, when it goes down, you need to respond so fast that your brain doesn't catch up to what you're doing. This is why a lot of post-traumatic stress really started evidencing itself once they started implementing a lot of these techniques, because people were doing what their mind and their soul considers to be unthinkable. Now, I think a lot of you are probably going to say, I'm in the 10%. Well, until you're in that situation, you'll never know. These are the natural soldiers, the psychopaths, or sociopaths, or whatever the technical term is for that. And maybe you are in that 10%, but statistically speaking, you're probably not. And if you surround yourself by other people to help you protect yourself and protect your family and protect your neighborhood, statistically speaking, 9 out of 10 of them are not either. They may be very good at shooting at circle targets, just like the World War II soldiers were. But until they've been trained and deprogrammed, they may not be all that much use in a fight. And that's something you need to think about. Now, if you have people who have experience, people training soldiers, people who have been through training, who can replicate a lot of the scenarios and a lot of things that are happening in basic training and boot camp and such like that, then you may have a chance to actually train folks around you. But until you address that, until you've realized the problem and address the problem, you will not be able to be an effective force in any way as a group. You might be an effective force by yourself because you just get lucky that you're one of the 10%. Or maybe you can get yourself up to that training level. Possibly. But I highly recommend you doing some reading. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to do some reading. This book will summarize it well. On Killing, Dave Grossman. This was recommended to me by a Green Beret back when I was in high school. He wasn't recommending it to me. He was recommending it to other veterans, actually, and I was sitting there. And I eventually picked up the book to see what the fuss was about, and it is eye-opening. It not only talks about that problem, it talks about overcoming that problem, it talks also about what happens after, the psychological impact of that, of taking a life. And it's not a pretty book, and it is not for the faint of heart. It is eye-opening, and it will change your perspective of the whole world. If you're looking at SHTF and you're getting all the toys together and you haven't thought long and hard about this, you're you're going in empty-handed. You don't have even the faintest inkling of what you're looking for. Now, I don't have any personal experience. I have intellectual experience from book reading, and I've had some brushes and some interesting experiences along the road, but nothing. I've never picked up arms against another human being ever, and so I do not know. A bunch of you do know. A bunch of you may be nodding your head and going, yup, yup. Some of you may not know exactly what I'm talking about, but it's connecting some dots for you. But for those of you who are like me, who have never been in that situation before, it sounds very foreign and very alien and very wrong. And yet, it's the truth. All right. Check it out. Make sure that you have what you need.